Okay, so now we're going to talk about how to select a concept for further development. And chances are that you and your team probably came up with a number of ideas. Some of them probably pretty good, and some of them maybe a little off the wall. So in this next step, we're going to talk about a long used systematic method for concept selection. And our process is going to consider whether or not the concepts will satisfy customer needs, manufacturability, and will highlight the concepts that have the best potential for market viability. Okay, so here you can see that concept selection comes directly after concept generation. After we've selected a few potential concepts here, we're going to test them in the next stage. And if we revisit the concept development funnel, you can see that concept screening and concept ranking, which are the processes that we're going to talk about here, involve narrowing down our concepts from really a bunch of ideas to a few really good ones. And ultimately, the one final idea that we're going to use or we're going to take to testing. And also, I wanted to highlight this relationship between, if you recall, convergent and divergent thinking. So remember, we talked about this before, where divergent thinking represents this unbounded creativity and thinking outside of the box. And convergent thinking refers to this process of narrowing down these creative ideas through discussion and group consensus, or by some other process of refinement. So here you can see that the concept generation part is really this process of unbounded creativity and divergent thinking, right? The arrow is going up. And we're going to use convergent thinking to screen and rank concepts and reduce them down to a few really good ones. And now you'll see in this method, when we screen concepts, there's a little bit of divergent thinking in that we sometimes want to combine concepts and make new ones, only to reevaluate them and then refine them. And so this is not necessarily a linear process. It kind of goes between convergent thinking or divergent thinking and convergent thinking and back again. So all in all, this concept selection process alternates between divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, so how do we select concepts? Well, here I boiled it down to about 5 steps. And first, we're going to prepare what's called a selection matrix. And I'll show you how to do this in a moment. But it basically involves preparing a condensed set of selection criteria based on the user needs elicitation that we did before. And also, we'll need to select what we call a reference concept. And so this is often a solution that already exists, or if nothing else, it's one that already meets the status quo. It will be the concept that all the other concepts are compared against. And so we have to make a new concept that at least marginally better than this reference concept. Otherwise, we'll have offered no improvement, right? Okay, then we're going to rate our concepts along the selection criteria. And so at this stage, we're asking, how well does concept A satisfy our criteria? And how well does concept B satisfy our criteria? And so on. And at this point, we're just asking whether or not the concepts just satisfy the criteria. We're not asking how well they satisfy it. We're doing this by simply indicating if the concept is better with a plus sign, or worse than with a negative sign, or the same as with a 0 sign, the reference concept. Okay, now we rank the concepts from best to worst by summing the scores that we just assigned. And in some cases, we could have a few very good ideas, but none of them are perfect. So here we might want to take the good parts from some of our ideas, some of the good ideas, and then combine them together to make better concepts. Last, we'll want to compare our best ideas qualitatively now. So here we're going to rank them using our criteria, and this usually produces a good concept that we'll want to test in the end. Okay, so let me show you how to do this. Okay, so this is a concept selection matrix that we talked about in the steps 1, 2, and 3. And along the columns, you can see the concept variants is what we call them. So these would be the results of our brainstorming sessions. And in this case, we've identified about 7 different concepts, and we just listed them, A through G here. Listing them this way is, it just saves a little space, honestly. In the last column, you can see that we've also listed our reference concept. So in this example, we're looking at, the new design of a disposable syringe. So it doesn't matter what, but in this example, the reference concept might be the syringe design that is currently in use. Okay, along the left-hand side, you'll see we've listed some of the selection criteria that we will want to evaluate against. So the selection criteria here are not as comprehensive as the full set of needs that we identified earlier, but we've kind of boiled them down to represent at least the primary needs in some of the key evaluation criteria. So here we might want to consider the operational criteria, like how easy and cost effective the syringe is to make and to manufacture. And again, you're just taking a general wag at the key selection criteria at this stage. The idea is just to sort out the really bad ideas, and focus on the potentially good ideas. Okay, next you're going to consider each concept variant and determine if it's better than the reference concept, worse than the reference concept, or the same as the reference concept with a plus sign, a negative sign, or 0. And the reason for doing this is it really allows the team to move quickly, and we're not getting hung up on specifics. So to decide which concepts you want to move forward with, you simply sum the concepts and then rank them from largest to smallest, with the number 1 concept receiving the most pluses, right? And the last step is to decide whether or not you want to continue evaluating this concept as a potential contender. So a couple of points here. The concept selection matrix was originally developed by a fellow named Stuart Pugh a number of years ago. So this guy was a British designer and an engineer. His approach caught on so well that many engineering groups used this approach regularly to screen ideas. And really there's a few good reasons for using this method. For one, it's a great way to facilitate overall the selection of a winning concept. And it can also help build a team consensus among the group through these discussions. It really helps to identify and implement, the desirable attributes of otherwise potentially weak concepts. And it does a good job of keeping a record of the decision-making process for references later on. Okay, so once we've sorted through the many ideas that were produced from concept generation, you should end up with a fairly short list of decent ideas. The challenge here is to decide which ones to pursue for development and testing. So the concept here is called concept ranking, and it's best used when you've already narrowed down to a short list of concepts. So here, this is a very similar idea to concept screening. Okay, you're going to list the concepts on the top columns, and you're going to list your selection criteria on the rows on the left. But now you're going to weight each of the selection criteria according to its relative importance. So for example, dose metering accuracy is super important when you're developing a syringe. So, we've weighted it here at 25%. Ease of manufacture, which is also, considers the cost of manufacturing in this case, it's also very important. And so it was weighted at 20%. And then everything else is kind of weighted somewhere less. And so now you score each concept on a scale of 0 to 5 for how well it achieves the criteria. And so weighted scores are then calculated, and then the total score is summed at the bottom. And here the concept titled Lever Stop was actually, it's a combination of concepts D and F. It won with the highest score of 3.45. And so the hope here is that all of your concepts would score at least higher than the reference concept. And if not, maybe this indicates a problem. Also, it's a good thing when creating your weights to do a quick sensitivity analysis to see if any of your criteria are even on the line for being effective. And again, this method, it's not perfect. Honestly, it's still subjective, even though we've assigned quantitative values here. But it still has a purpose. Another thing, the evaluations themselves should reflect the preferences of the customers in the target market. So when you're assigning the weightings, try to create them with the end user in mind. Ask yourself, how important is this criteria to the user? But also ask, how important is it to the company? Okay, so I hope this helps clarify a little bit how you would use concept screening and concept ranking to narrow down your ideas and decide which ones you want to prototype and test in the next step. Join us next time for a discussion on testing.